our recording. That way, if anybody was unable to be with us tonight, they can go ahead and pick that up on the recording. Right? If you mute yourselves, that way when it's time to come back in, if you have a comment and one of us calls on you, you can unmute yourself, and I don't have to control everything. But I do want to share with you one thing. If you all notice, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a little 2 people participants, right? There's 36 people with us tonight. If you click on that, great. There'll be a participant up on the right-hand side. A participant chat box will come out. And if you scroll over your name, you'll see 2 blue boxes come up, a mute and a more. If you click on the more, let me go grab one of these. Then you can go down and see where it says rename. So if your name on the bottom of your screen is something that you don't want, like iPad, or there's just one name, but there's 2 people, if you want to go ahead, you can change your name right there to whoever's on the screen. That way, as we talk to each other, we can get to know each other a little bit. So that's one wonderful thing. There's also a chat box down there on the bottom. And if you click on the chat box, I'd like you all to open the chat box. And I'd really appreciate if you put your first and last name in. We chase around going, who's Diane? Diane, first and last name. Gail, first and last name. If you guys can put your first and last name in the chat box, and also your email address. And we're about to put a brand new newsletter out with some updates from Sanctuary. And also, where are you calling in from? So I know we've got some Canadians. Where are my Canadians in the house today? Oh, you got yourself muted, so you can't even tell me.
Can you hear me?
Irene's out there, and Janice and Janet, right, from Canada. It's an international night, so we're doing pretty good. I will tell you also, if you have any comments during the evening, you can also just type those into the chat box. And Barb Crabtree, you can see her on one of the little screens, and Cheryl, those 2 are going to monitor the chat box. So if you have a question, they can help answer directly to you. Or if you have a question that you want asked, Barb or Cheryl, just raise your hand, get my attention, and we'll bring that question into the group. Does that sound good?
Can you hear us? Can you hear us? I don't have a chat box. Tony, I don't have a chat box on the iPad. I don't see it.
I don't know, Tony, anybody else on an iPad that's got the chat? Sometimes those symbols are on the top on an iPad. I know that.
Yeah, I'm looking at everything on the top, but I don't see anything that says chat. Share contact. Contact. Would that be chat? No.
No, it says just chat. Anybody else on an iPad?
Doesn't. Chat. Okay, I found a chat. I found a chat. I found one
on an iPad. If you would unmute yourself and you could help Tony. Anybody?
I found it. I found it.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and begin this. I thank you first, all of you, for coming. How exciting for us that so many people. I have 2 screens tonight, so I can't even see you all, which is a wonderful problem to have. And I want to welcome you and welcome many of you back to Tuesday Night at Sanctuary. Our latest adventure, Sanctuary Online. Many of you know that our vision at Sanctuary in the Woods was to build a nonprofit retreat center out here just east of Austin, Texas, a place where folks can come to get off the grid a bit, and they can rest and reflect, reframe, and then go back and re-engage their own lives a little more gently and consciously because they were here with us for a while at Sanctuary. And we were well on our way to doing that, spending a great deal of the time of this first quarter of 2020 with lawyers and civil engineers, getting all the topographical and legal details to fall into line. And then in March, just like with you, our lives and even the vision that we had of our lives and for Sanctuary changed overnight, right? And our board met, we got together, and we discussed the restrictions that we felt, as well as the opportunities that we saw to pivot and shift and say, what are we still supposed to do to live in that world that's so deep in our DNA, we can still be at Sanctuary. And we said, how can we continue to fulfill our desire to offer inspirational and important and life-giving programming in a time of COVID? You know, how can we do that differently? And a little bit of water, some coffee, possibly a bit of wine. We birthed Sanctuary Online. And it's our hope that you'll join us every Tuesday night with as many folks as can come to Tuesday nights at Sanctuary. We plan to offer programming every Tuesday night. And we first asked a few questions. We said, 1, who's our current audience? 2, who's the wider audience we wish to serve? And 3, most importantly, what questions are people asking right now? And that's what guided our decisions as to how to fill our calendar. You know, and we've been so lucky to have such fabulously talented people, masters of their crafts, and presenters who could bring answers to some of our most pressing questions. Questions about how to live life abundantly and intentionally and with health and balance, you know, right now under this really constantly changing world we find ourselves living in. So many of you know that tonight that fabulous fella was supposed to be our very own Reverend Ken Martin. And Edie, I want to give you a shout out. In your ad today, I loved how you put it. You said tonight's feature was going to be about relationships during COVID. And stay tuned for that one because the presenter, Ken Martin, well, got COVID. So then you asked for prayers for Ken. So I just want to appreciate that. And I did love how you said that. And so as we thought that Ken would be presenting tonight, we know that many of you were hoping to see Ken. And we actually think the most pressing question for many folks around the globe, literally, is how is Ken doing? And so tonight we said we're going to go online. The show must go on anyway. And our format will be a little bit different than normal. First and foremost, we're going to give you an update on Ken and the rest of us who live here at Sanctuary. Second, a bit of detail about what actually happened, because many of us, we don't know how's it going to feel when things happen to us. Third, we're going to give you a few lessons learned. I got a text today from someone, a good friend of mine, who said, you guys were being so careful. How could this have happened? And we want to tell you, we were being so careful. How could this have happened? And since it did happen, we want to share with you some lessons learned, and the reasons we want to do that is because we think there are things that each of you could possibly be even doing differently to be even more careful regarding, you know, an unexpected contracting of a little tiny COVID virus that will overnight change your life. Fourth, our daughter Rachel is a firefighter and a paramedic in the Indianapolis Fire Department, and she's going to pop on, and she's a very busy woman, but she's going to pop on in a little while and share a bit of her expertise around COVID as a first responder from the, you know, particular perspective as a paramedic. But she's also, Rachel actually had COVID, she and her husband contracted COVID right away. And as a paramedic, she went right back in the front lines and was quarantined again because she should have gotten it a second time and luckily didn't. So she'll be with us to share, maybe even answer a few of your questions. And then finally, we are so blessed to have the presenters for next week and the next week. They'll give you little teasers and share with you about what we have teed up for May 26th and for June 2nd. Sound good?
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm excited about that. So a little bit of what actually happened. And the reason we want to share this is because, you know, you never know actually how it's going to happen. And Friday night, Ken went to bed at 11 o'clock. Any of you who know Ken know, gosh, that was early. What's wrong? But he was actually feeling fabulous. He said, I went to bed Friday night. I felt fine. 2:30 in the morning. So just a few hours later, he woke up and he was coughing, a really heavy cough. He felt a tightness in his chest, not pain, but a tightness. And he was running a fever a couple degrees more than his norm. And so immediately, immediately, Tom and Ken separated bedrooms at that point. And Saturday morning, Cheryl and Barb and I got a phone call to come on over to the house where Tom, as you can imagine, was a bit shaken up. And he shared with us, you know, what went on last night, in the middle of the night. And what we did, we really kind of tested what are the symptoms. Yes, and we checked them again. Are those all the symptoms of COVID? If they are, what are our options? And many of you, you'd know that your option is 1, rest, go back to bed, do nothing. 2, head to an emergency room, right? Or 3, 911, correct? Most of the options. Yeah. Ken, being advanced in age, and we didn't want him to do nothing, right? We knew those definitely were symptoms of COVID. And the second option was to take him to an ER. I don't know about you, but not a lot of folks want to go to an ER right now if you don't have to, right? Not a safe place. Even if he didn't have COVID, he would now go into an environment, right, where there is COVID and lots of disease. And also, none of us wanted to drive him. We want to be very transparent with you and just say, you know, if he had the virus, none of us wanted to get in the car and spend that time with him, right? So we went ahead and we agreed we're going to call 911. And here's what I'm going to tell you in Maynard. Now, every city is going to be different, but we have been so impressed with the level of care. We called 911. I think, Tom, actually you called, and I was there in the kitchen with you. They talked to us and immediately dispatched the ambulance, the fire truck, the EMS truck, you know, the whole lights and sirens. And then they patched us into a COVID specialist. And that person, whose name was Craig, he then talked right directly to Ken and asked him a number of health questions. So that was quite helpful. The paramedics got here and they all came in and they took Ken outside of his house, outside of the house on the porch, and just, again, analyzed him, took his temperature, checked his breath, checked his lungs. At the end of the day, they said, we believe that what you have is COVID, but they do not actually have test kits. So the firefighters did not test Ken at that moment. They did give him a breathing treatment, you know, because his oxygen level was at a 93. And just if you care about numbers, 95 and below is not fabulous, right? And they asked Ken many questions, and Ken has no other really compromising issues. So they were concerned that his oxygen level was that low, all right? Then they gave Ken 3 options. They said, 1, you can go to any hospital that you want to go to. And what's going to happen is if you go to that hospital, they're going to assess you and then take you by ambulance to one of the COVID hospitals that are here in the area. There's one up in Round Rock and there's one south of the city. And I know Ken and Tom, you can jump in here. Both of you would have preferred to go to a hospital that you're very comfortable with in the city. But what we learned, in St. David's, right? What we learned was St. David's, because it has a NICU, any hospital with a NICU, they do not want to see COVID patients. So most of those hospitals have set up, they'll assess you, but then they're putting you back in the ambulance and sending you somewhere else. So, you know, that option was less optimal. They said, again, he could drive himself somewhere, or they could take him in the ambulance right then and take him to one of the COVID hospitals. And they let Ken make that decision. So I just want to tell you, as you go into this system, you're still in charge of your own healthcare, right? You're still in charge of your own decisions. And Ken chose to stay home. He said, I understand what's going on. I understand what's happening with me. And they gave us, you know, things to look for, which was any confusion. COVID also often goes to the brain, or a lack of oxygen getting to Ken's brain, a changing of color of any of his skin, his face, anything like that, or lower oxygen. They said if he gets exhausted without exertion, those are things to watch for. That means this is kind of getting more aggressive. And as we all know, COVID can get very aggressive very rapidly. And everyone says you don't want to get behind this. You want to always stay out in front of what's going on with you, the symptoms. Next day, Ken felt about the same. He did eat, but he also, the next morning, he lost taste and smell. At that point was when all of us said, you know what, it's COVID, you know, for sure, even though he hadn't been tested. So the next day, he woke up and said he was feeling a little more congested in the chest, and he couldn't breathe. He was incredibly exhausted and couldn't breathe. So Cheryl and I went down to the fire department and asked if just the paramedics could come out and give him a breathing treatment without the fire trucks and the ambulances and everything, all the bells and whistles stuff. And they said, no, You can drive him to the ER where they may give him a treatment, or you can call 911. And that's what we did. We went home, we discussed things, and the same paramedics actually came out and took care of Ken for the second time, and took his temperature, took his oxygen, talked to his doctor, relayed in to his doctor, and then finally, because Ken started to wheeze, she said, I'm going to give you another breathing treatment. So that happened on Sunday morning, right, Cheryl? Monday morning.
And the shot, Joby.
And they gave him a steroid shot. That's right, Tom. Thanks very much. They gave him a steroid shot, which he was complaining about for quite some time. Oh, so that leads to today. Ken woke up and his doctor wanted to see him. So his doctor, who he feels great confidence in, he drove himself. And we were all careful about that, but he drove himself down to the doctor, said it was amazing that when he got to the doctor, someone came outside and said, are you Ken Martin? Please stay in your car. We're going to call you when we're ready for you. So no waiting room, nothing like that. Ken stayed in his car. He said exactly at 1 o'clock, they called him. He came in and everyone else was far away from him. You know, he went down the hallway right into a special COVID room. And it was just bang, bang, bang. They knew exactly what they were doing to keep their staff safe, any other clients safe, and to keep Ken safe. And the good news was that she said she did give him a test, the results of which will be back in about 7 to 10 days. Is that right? 6 to 7 days.
Yes.
And the doctor also said that's the only test she'll give. There are many tests, many of you have seen it on the news, that might give you results in 45 minutes or in a day. She said those are giving really high false readings. And so she only wanted this, us to go ahead and get that test that will be ready for him within probably the next 7 days or so. She also listened to Ken's lungs and said, you definitely have pneumonia in both of your lower lungs. Okay, so that is his status right now. The good news is, she said that yes, you have COVID, but COVID, there's no treatment, right? There's no treatment for COVID. There is treatment for pneumonia. And so she says, I'm going to treat you, Ken, for the pneumonia. And she prescribed X number of proper prescriptions. Cheryl, you went down and got those, right? So we kept Ken and kept Tom safe at Sanctuary. And the other good news that she gave us was that because she believes Ken had COVID for about 5 days prior to Saturday, prior to his symptoms, that all of us were living together with Ken having COVID, but because none of the other 5 of us who are here we have no symptoms whatsoever yet, she doesn't think any of us have COVID, so good news for us, good news for Ken. And we are all going to go down tomorrow in Manor. There's a drive-through test every Wednesday. And so we're going to go ahead and go on together and get our brains swabbed so we can go check and just make sure what's going on. Mostly for peace of mind, because as you know, there's still 6 of us all living very close community. Although I will tell you that Ken and Tom have kind of separated realms of the house. All of us, Barb, Cheryl, myself, and our son Rory, who's here, we're not eating together anymore. We've really separated significantly. Tom has swabbed that house with more bleach. That is the only smell in the house. Any of you been to Sanctuary and you smell some of that great food cooking or whatever? None of it. It smells clean. So Tom has done an amazing job keeping the house clean. And all of us now are swabbing every doorknob we walk through. We're wearing masks if we go into the house. We're being very, very careful to make sure that we don't spread it to each other, and especially not to Mr. Tom Cole. So Cheryl or Barb, did I miss anything on that kind of explanation of where we are so far?
Joby, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Tom.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Remember that Ariel said not to really go the very first time she was here to all of us for the test. because it would probably come back incorrectly, and we needed to wait for 5 days, which I found
Yeah, good
very
point, Tom.
interesting.
Yeah, and Rachel not sure she's on yet, but Rachel has said the reason for that is because you can contract COVID, you can contract the virus, but the viral load is not built up in your system enough for about 5 days. If you're not on mute, folks, you can put yourself on mute if you don't mind. That'll keep some of the other, the background noise down. But yeah, so Tom, so she basically told us not to go get tested because at that point in time, all of us would probably come back negative, even if we had the virus, but simply didn't have any symptoms yet. So great ad, Tom. Thank you. Anything else? Or if any of you have a question, trying to look at the time here, anybody have a question about what's going on? If you can you can just unmute yourself and ask that question.
Does the COVID cause the pneumonia?
Good. That's Bundell, right? Yeah. Actually, yes. And I will also say that what Ken's doctor said, she believes that he's pretty far along in the curve because pneumonia, if you have a mild case, that the pneumonia is one of the last things that happens. Okay. Now we always, all of us want to be cautious to make sure that every body is going to react differently to the same virus, right? And so even in Maynard, what his doctor said this morning is that, they're seeing a certain, what did he call it today, Cheryl? Like a frame in Maynard that is
Large
really
amount of.
What, Tom?
I'd say there's a large amount of people that have the same symptoms as Ken does in our area.
In our area. And they believe it's all coming basically from the Walmart, where we do not go anymore. They said a small town, if it has one place to shop, that one place to shop is probably where most people are, transmitting the disease to each other. So you want to be careful at that. We suddenly said, we're not going to Maynard anymore. We're going to head further away from Maynard and shop in stores that are a little further away from the hotbed.
Shopping online, Toby.
Yeah, we are now shopping online. And folks, we also want to thank everyone's been so great to say, we'll bring food, we'll take care of you. And we've got friends that are doing that for us. And so none of us, because we could still be asymptomatic, but carrying the virus, we don't want to go ahead and leave the property and give that to anybody else. So I'm gonna jump onto some lessons learned. Unless there's any more questions, I want to make sure. I know a lot of you are worried about Ken, and I'm worried about the rest of us here.
Toby,
Go ahead, Cheryl.
just a couple things. Do you want to mute everyone, or do you not want to do that? That's okay. That was just one thing. And then the other thing is, I just want to remind everybody again that if they haven't put their name and where they're calling in from and their email into the chat box, so please do that.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl.
Please
All right, how
mute.
about some lessons learned? Cheryl, since you're chatting, how about some lessons learned? Want to jump in, Cheryl?
Okay. Yeah, one of the biggest things that Joe and I talked about was, in a lot of situations where one person in a partnership, something happens to them, the other person doesn't really know where all their stuff is that they've been working on. For instance, she didn't know, because we have different health insurance, where my health insurance is. And, I didn't know where some of the things that she works on that I don't have access to. I do all of our bills. She probably doesn't know all the passwords to all the places that I go to pay the bills. So things like that, we just started thinking, wow, we really do need to put this together so that we have access to information that we need if one of us ends up in the hospital or in any other situation. It just brought it to our attention again.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Part of that is we know it's there, But honest to God, if Cheryl took off at 2:30 in the morning into an ambulance and then into the ER and then didn't come out or didn't come out for a while, you know, so just it kind of raised that to our attention that we talk about doing it all the time. Suddenly it got real important, you know. Barb, what about you, my friend? Barb, you got your face on there somewhere?
Yep, I just turned
There
it
you
back
go.
on.
Show us your face.
All right. Well, some of the stuff, lessons learned, now that things are opening back up again, I think some of the things that we think we know are going to change. Like Ken shared when he came back from the doctor today that there are variations and like little mutations in this everywhere. And there's kind of like a common set of symptoms around Manor that may be different from the progression and the particular symptoms that you see in New York or California or anywhere else. So because it happened a certain way with Ken does not mean that someone else, someplace else, would experience that exact same path.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, the other thing that the doctor said was people are, you know, as people travel out, if they are exposed and contract the virus somewhere else and then bring it home, those two variants, virus A and virus B, marry up and have little baby viruses that are virus C and D and aren't like A or B. So, you know, this is, you know, there's just a lot here to kind of wrap your head around in terms of what we think we already know, but maybe don't.
If I may, Joe, yeah, I think people need to realize that a lot of their routines are going to change, and it's tough being in red states. So Selena and I are in Georgia, and y'all are in Texas, and a lot of governors are saying, well, we can open up, and people think that's an excuse to go back to business as normal, but we have to be vigilant. You know, if we have to go out for work or for necessities, always wear your mask, your gloves, bring your hand sanitizer. Don't let your guard down just because, you know, a governor is under political pressure to open things up. But we need to always use common sense and never forget the basics when we have to go out.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely, Jordan. Yeah, thank you. Barb, a lesson learned. You made dinner tonight. I just was curious that you want to share how you made dinner differently tonight.
Right. Tonight I sat down and really was intentional because about, you know, making sure I did things differently because I just made spaghetti. If any of you know me, you know that I'm good with PowerPoint and spreadsheets, but maybe not so good with cooking. So I had to kind of think this through, and you know what I did was I got all of the, you know, pots and utensils and everything out, and I washed my hands, you know, for 20 seconds in warm soapy water and wore a mask, and I washed all of the pots and pans and utensils, even though, you know, I had washed them, put them in the cabinet clean. I washed everything again before I used it tonight. And, you know, was just extra careful with everything. And then when I took the spaghetti over, Tom had put a hot pad out on the table on the porch, and I just set the pot on the hot pad there, and he came out and got it. So, I mean, it was just extra careful cautions because, you know, I mean, I don't want to complicate anything for Ken, and I sure as heck, you know, don't want to give anything to Tom.
Yeah. Thanks, Barb. It's you know, we were chatting because as many of you know, we've been very, very careful, and it still got here. And we thought, wow, if Ken, you know, had been walking around with carrying the virus for 4 to 5 days prior to Saturday when he showed symptoms, we'd been eating together around the same table. He was preparing food for all of us, touching utensils and things like that. We clear the table. I took Ken's plate and his, you know, silverware. And then, you know, the rest of us, Tom and Ken kind of do the cooking duties. The rest of us do the cleaning duties after dinner. And so only the one person who washed the dishes had nice soapy hands for 20 seconds, right? Everybody else, if they brought those dishes over, would contract the virus, dry all the rest of the dishes, and now keep moving that virus around the kitchen with the utensils and the plates and silverware that we use. So we thought, wow, thinking back, you know, or even thinking ahead, maybe now we get up from dinner and each person takes their own utensils, even if we're all healthy and we don't think we have it, right? We take our utensils, our plate, our cup, and either put those in the soapy water by ourselves, or we put those things right into the dishwasher. You know, so little things like that. We also, none of us were really crazy careful around before we left the house after dinner to use hand sanitizer or wash our hands on the way out of the house. And so we just thought doorknobs, refrigerator, freezer opening, things like that. If you're walking around, we really thought of other families, because right now you might be living alone. Is there a person who knows if you leave at 2:30 in an ambulance, who are you going to call to let somebody know, you know, this has happened, I'm okay, but I'm taking care of myself? If you're a couple, Cheryl and I sleep in the same bed. Well, if one of us gets sick, do you have a place for the other non-sick person to go, a second bedroom that's ready, you know, with a change of clothes and things like that for the next morning? Just little things that, you know, you don't want to have to think of, like Tom and Ken had to think of this at 2:30 in the morning. And are you going to make all the right decisions? Or like families who have a fire plan or a tornado plan or an earthquake plan, have you talked with your partner, or with your partner, maybe with your children? Or Cheryl and I will be home in a month or so living with my mom. You know, Mom and Cheryl and I should have a talk around what should happen if one of us gets sick or Mom gets sick. So we know there are families living together right now that maybe don't live together. Here at Sanctuary, our son Rory is here. He wasn't planning on staying. He came for a visit, and then COVID happened. So he's been wonderful helping around the house, but it does change, you know, our own dynamics. So just, we're really trying to encourage you to think, have you sat with the people that you live with and had one of those plans, a what if plan? Because we thought we were ready. We really did. We talked quite a few times, but once it really hit, we knew we hadn't talked at a level of detail that was probably as deeply as we could have. And so we just want to encourage that for you all to think, even if you feel fine, you got to know that you could be asymptomatic, carrying that virus, and are you passing it around, you know, to the folks that you live with. So I think I saw Rachel on here. Those were most of our, you know, quick lessons learned. Rachel, are you there somewhere, and can you unmute yourself? There you go. I see you.
Hi.
I want to welcome you, my friend, and thank you, Rachel, so much for showing up tonight. I gave a little bit of an intro of you at the top of the hour, Rachel. I just shared as a paramedic and a firefighter for Indianapolis. You are on the front lines. You're seeing this, and you're seeing it from a firefighter, a first responder, and a medical person's perspective. And I also shared that you actually contracted COVID, you know, right away, lived through that. And just offer, maybe you could offer us some of your expertise or some of your perspective for a moment or two. And thank you.
Yeah. What would you like to hear about, or first?
Is there anybody that has a particular thing they'd like to hear about? And you could toss that in the chat. I'm seeing that Barb says Floridians are used to having a hurricane preparedness kit and having the same thing for COVID. You know what? I'm going to speak to that one really quickly, Rachel, because we talked about that. Many of you might have a COVID kit. Ours had hand sanitizer, wipes, Clorox, yellow Windex, masks, and gloves. You know what we have now? We went out and we got zinc. We got a lot of vitamin C. We got thermometers for each different person in the house so you can track your temperature. And also, we did not have a pulse oximeter here on property. And so if we did, you know, Ken being a 93, we could have tracked his blood oxygen level. And so if you don't have those things, you can get them, but like anything else with COVID, sometimes those are hard to find. We did have some friends order a pulse ox on Amazon, I believe, but it's not going to get here until Wednesday. So even, thinking ahead, that's a great thing to add, Barb. So
Yep.
Edie is asking Rachel, how did you feel compared to how Ken felt? And this goes back to every body is going to be different, right? It's going to react differently, right, Ray?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so my husband and I both got COVID, and we started feeling sick within like the same hour as each other. It was very strange, really, at the beginning. We got sick at the beginning of March. And so it was right on the forefront. We hadn't really talked about social distancing measured yet. We were just beginning to have certain things getting canceled consistently and everything. And so it was on everybody's minds, but there weren't really tons of measures in place yet. But Austin and I got really lucky. We felt fairly okay most of the time. The first night, it felt like we were fine all throughout the day. I had a bit of a dry cough I was like joking about it. I was at work the night before on shift, and I was just saying, oh, haha, I've got something caught in my throat, a little bit of a dry cough, and we thought it was silly, and we're like, now everybody's gonna think I have COVID. And Austin said that he felt a tickle in his throat, and that was kind of the only symptom that we had. And then both of us felt fine again for 12, 15, 18 hours. And then starting in the evening, we both just started getting that sense of like, and you all know what it feels like when you're like, I am about to be sick. Like, you just get that achy, lower energy, like your body starts to be more sensitive. So both of us started feeling that. And I would say that was 7 or 8 p.m. We had gone and taken our dogs on a play date with some friends at like 6. And by about midnight, we both felt pretty terrible. It came on pretty quickly for us as well. Austin spiked a fever that night. I never had a fever at any point. So that's one thing I would say. I know a lot of people are using temperature as sort of a like line of measurement. I never had a temperature, and I know a lot of the patients that we see never have temperatures. So just something to keep in mind, that people's bodies respond differently. But Austin had a fever the first night, and we both just felt very, without saying like, oh, it's kind of like the flu, like our particular symptoms felt very fluid. We were both achy, tired, fevery, low energy. Austin had some bowel issues. I didn't have any of those. He had some bad headaches. I didn't have any of those. But I did lose my sense of taste and sense of smell. He didn't lose his. So we kind of just had different feelings. I would say our symptoms lasted for about 3 days consistently, where we weren't like knocked down, drag out. We could move around the house. We took care of our dogs. We were able to make simple meals and eat, but we vegged out on the couch and slept a lot and were in bed a lot. But we weren't so bad that like we didn't feel capable of taking care of ourselves or anything. Austin's mom lives in our city with us, and she came by and brought us a couple of things that were just comfort items for groceries and stuff. And I will say, Joe, we don't own a thermometer. We didn't own a thermometer, and we did want to know Austin's fever the first night.
Yeah.
And so a friend of ours who's a nurse brought one to us, and she's like, you can keep that thermometer now. So now we own a thermometer. But yeah, I would say that was one that we wished we had, just to keep an eye on. And especially when Austin went downhill pretty quickly. He felt really bad the first night. And I was like, I want to know if you have a 101 or a 103 temperature. Because that makes a difference in, how nervous you are about somebody. So a thermometer is probably a good thing to get if you don't have it. We called a couple of Walmarts and CVS's and Walgreens, and they were all completely out. So we had to have a friend bring one to us. Yeah. And then I would say for about a week, we both didn't feel 100%. It definitely wasn't, we didn't bounce back perfectly. I had a lot of major body aches. We had gotten a new mattress, and I was trying to be like, maybe it's just the new mattress. Like maybe it, you know, my back was really hurting, and I kind of felt like I'd been in a car wreck or something. And then I think I can look back and see now that that was definitely just still a symptom, that my body was still just fighting the illness.
Yeah.
Austin had headaches and joint pain and stuff for a good week and a half as well. So it just took some time to get back to full capacity. Neither of us had shortness of breath or coughs or any difficulty breathing at any point. So ultimately, we feel like we had a pretty mild case, and we feel really lucky and grateful that we were okay the whole time. Neither of us at any point felt like we had to pursue or consider like higher medical care or anything. But yeah, that's kind of where we were at. We both got tested through our work, and both tested positive. We completely isolated and quarantined as soon as we started feeling symptoms through Austin went back to work at 16 days after feeling sick. I went back 18 days. So Austin had to get negative tests before he went back to work. I had to go through a physical exam. But yeah, that's kind of where we were at, what it felt like for us. I would say, I don't know, like if it's valuable, like lessons learned from us and lessons learned just from me being on the job and having had patients that have had COVID or high risk exposures, that type of thing. I would say a thermometer is a good idea. An oxygen saturation is a pretty good idea. I have a friend who has COVID right now here. And the one thing that I've been mentioning to her is, every day, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? And there was a day where she said, I'm just feeling really, like I tried to take a load of laundry down the stairs and I'm feeling really exhausted and tired. I'm having a hard time catching my breath just being around my house. And I said, yeah, cool. This is the fire station I'm asking, I'm going to send you to. This is the person on shift that's my friend that I'm going to ask you to go to. And, obviously perks of being best friends with a firefighter in your city. But I was able to send her to the firehouse without having to go to the hospital, but I wanted to know what her O2 saturation was, because that's kind of the biggest risk factor for people in terms of whether you're going to fall into the next category of you need medical care or you need to be watched to make sure that you're not developing symptoms that could cause further complications. So the O2 sats, at least that's what I've seen as being kind of a critical thing. So that, or even just, it's different for everybody in everybody's cities, but I can tell you that the ambulances and the fire trucks all have those. You can call 911 and it doesn't necessarily mean that you are required to then be transported to a hospital. Patients still have the right to ask for care and ask for evaluation, and it does not mean that you have to go to the hospital. It doesn't mean you'll be billed. Now, I guess I should caveat this with I don't know where everyone lives and everyone's cities and circumstances, but for the most part, you shouldn't be charged for them to come to your home and do an evaluation. So if you just want an O2 sat read or something like that, if you begin getting into medication administration, it changes. But people can come and check an O2 sat. They can use their stethoscope and listen to lung sounds and make some recommendations. So we've done that for lots of people, done evaluations and then made recommendations from there one way or the other.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Rachel. I think it's interesting that someone in the comments just said all of these different cases, 3 that we know of here, and everyone had different symptoms, so I think it's really valid. Rachel and I were chatting earlier on the phone and how you really can't tell anyone what's going to happen. You can tell them what your experience was, right? And yet other people, the headache, no headache, Ken just sitting on the porch trying to share with what his doctor shared with us, he was just obviously way out of breath. And he does have, I don't know if you were on, Rachel, when I said he has pneumonia in both lower lungs.
Yeah, I heard that.
Again, something that's treatable. So we think that's good news. I've got a couple people just asking. Yeah, someone said there's a doctor how COVID can attack the lungs. demonstrating a breathing exercise. And that's what someone else asked, you know, is Ken is now supposed to be out in the sun 20 minutes a day, which at 100 degrees in Texas today, you can do that. And also do a lot of real deep breathing and try to make sure his lung capacity, you know, he's doing his own work, I guess, like most of us out of the hospital, right? They give you that little breather. Mom, you've got like 15 of those things, right? Where you breathe and you suck it in and you breathe deeply. I don't know, Rachel, if that's something that you want to speak to, because it sounds like a pulse oximeter, like you guys would have loved to track Austin's temperature, just to be sure. 101 is one level of danger. 103 is a different level of, you know, it's escalating, right? That's the thing they would have told us. We had the thermometers, we didn't have a pulse, and still don't have a pulse oximeter to track Ken's blood oxygen level. Yeah.
Right. And obviously a pulse ox is something that most people wouldn't have or think about having in their arsenal of things. It's really only been relevant the last few months. Yeah. And I mean, another way I think the thing that's complicated with COVID, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm a paramedic. That's a different level of training. What I have read and understand a little bit is that, like, the reason that people feel out of breath isn't because they're not actually getting oxygen exchange. Our brains register carbon dioxide, and that's how we know if we need to like take a deeper breath. It's our carbon dioxide levels. So when we feel out of breath, it's actually because we're not able to exhale all the carbon dioxide that our brains want us to.
Right.
The thing that's complicated with COVID is that the carbon dioxide levels aren't actually being affected as much as the actual O2 exchange. And it just has to do with like alveoli and the way that the cells are being affected. But so people are able to sometimes walk around with lower O2 sats and not really feel as though they're out of breath or short of breath. So that's why the pulse ox comes into play as the way, like, there are a lot of people who are entering into the hospitals. I think what's the name for it? They're calling them something like happy breathers, or there's some term that they've started using for people are walking around, talking on the phone, hanging out, you know, chatting with the doctors, and their O2 sats are like at levels that the nurses and the doctors are like, they shouldn't be acting like that. They should be struggling to breathe at these numbers. So that's just, it's not to scare anybody, but you know, if you do have it, that's one thing to keep a good eye on, is just your O2 sats and how you're feeling. Another thing that people could Google is something called proning. There seems to be kind of some anecdotal information about that doing really good things for certain people with COVID. It's literally just a positioning where you lay on your stomach in a prone position. It's done really good things. It exposes more cells in your lungs. If you have fluid in your lungs, the fluid settles to a different part of your lungs, and then there's more cells that are available for oxygen exchange. And so people have seen increases in O2 sats, not even with breathing treatments or oxygen, just by positioning differently. So that's something Ken could maybe try to when he's short of breath or out of breath, but it's something other people could look into. Those are kind of, that's the thing I know. I'm sure there's other stuff that other nurses and stuff know more about.
Yep. Well, and we're not asking to be the person with all the answers, Rachel. We just really appreciate you coming in with your, you know, like I said, your expertise of both. You're seeing a lot. And again, interesting, what you see in Indianapolis might be very different what we see here in Austin, or even a small town like Manor, you know, or some of the other cities that people are calling in from. But we just really appreciate the fact that you're sharing just even those 3 cases, help all of us to know that we may not have the symptom. You know, it may affect our body like this and this and this. We still want to be really cautious, and especially Ken's doctor said you don't want to get behind this thing. One of the things we've been hearing, Rachel, is that some people, they kind of get through maybe 3/4 of the disease progression, think they're better, and then suddenly it comes back and reattacks the lungs, and that's when they don't have as much time because the body has already tried to fight for so long, there's not much fight left. So Ken's doctor thought he was past that point, and with taking a look at him, with really assessing him today, she thinks he's through the hardest part and the most dangerous part. she thinks he's further along in the disease progression than he may have thought he was, which we all took that as really good news. And we're still watching him very closely. Tom is the best nurse on the planet. So he's a protector, and he's keeping us safe and keeping all of Ken safe, keeping himself safe. And that's what we're really trying to do. We think if one person here somehow could have contrived of the virus and the other 5 of us don't catch it, then it, that's hopeful to other people, right? That just because you're living with someone who has it doesn't mean you have to also catch it. It means you take the proper precautions and you can contain it, as best you can.
Yeah, and Joe, if I can say one more thing on that, just to offer people that hope or whatever too.
Yeah.
The night, like I started feeling sick on a Tuesday, and the dry cough thing started showing up while I was still at work on the Monday. And then I didn't start feeling sick till the Tuesday night. But I lived for 24 hours in a small house with 12 other people at my work. I was actually the cook on the Monday before I got sick on the Tuesday. Unfortunate timing, but I cooked both of our meals that day. I was, we're all in close proximity with each other. We wash our hands all the time consistently at work anyway, and we maintain some level of that, but I think, that's all we were doing at that time. None of us were feeling sick or anything. But I cooked, and I was also, I drive an apparatus with my partner, and we're in, a 1 foot by 1 foot box with each other for hours and hours on end, driving around, being in each other's space. And then I sleep in the same bedroom as everybody. And we're just very close for a long period of time. And nobody else at my fire station got sick. So just, it just feels kind of random, or maybe that's just an anecdote it's not, anyone else's story, but we did have the same level of intimacy, and no one else in my firehouse got sick at any point. So there is definitely a possibility that you can be in intimate space with someone who absolutely has COVID and you still just walk away not having had it. So.
Yeah.
That's encouraging, Rachel. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to
Rachel, there was a question in the chat box that I think Edie probably typed in. What are the biggest myths? Can the virus live on prepared food, and can we ingest it? Do you have any frame of reference for answering that?
I do not know with scientific certainty either of those answers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Good way. And I think Selena is also piping in here. Yes, we're all wearing PPE now, and the fire station gave us some N95s in case we have to drive Ken somewhere, a surgical mask for him, N95s for us. We've put our little name on our N95s, and if we're going into the house, we wear our mask, over and over. And granted, still the best thing to do, and I bet, Rachel, you would probably agree with this, is just keeping a distance, from people. And there's just not enough. It is a tough disease, and it is, as I think Barb was sharing in the beginning, it continues to mutate, continues to change. And so keeping proper social distance from folks is really, probably the best measure so the virus can't keep on finding new hosts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if there's anything else for Rachel, it's almost top of the hour. I just want to say thank you, Ray. We really appreciate you coming on. And we know you're not the answer person, and yet your perspective is some fabulous. So I'm gonna do this for just a moment. I'm gonna risk I'm gonna unmute you so you can give some love to Ray.
Yay!
Thank
you, Rachel.
Thank you. Great, Rachel. Thanks,
Thank you,
Rachel.
Rachel.
But it was not
See
necessary.
you, Rachel.
And I'm muting you again. Now I'm muting you all
Thanks,
again.
Ray. Good to
So,
see you.
The phone's muted.
Thanks so much, Ray. I just want to lift up, every week we want to bring you something that's of value, right? And we're so excited about next Tuesday and next Tuesday. And we promise to get Ken back on the schedule as soon as he has good breath in his lungs to be Ken to all of us. And so he'll be hopefully scheduled later in June. But I think Lauren, I'm not sure, Wes, if you're here, but next week we thought, and I thought of you, Mom, there's lots of people who are attending church now, and attending church is kind of different because you don't have to choose the church that you've always gone to. Yeah, you can choose. I know I think mom goes to church at her Methodist church. She goes to church at my brother's church for the preaching, but not the music. Goes to church at Toronto for the music, but not the preaching. And so she can see everything. And I love that. But many of us are still going to church at our kitchen table or in the living room. And I've heard people say it just doesn't feel like church. So Lauren, if you're there, or you and Wes, if you want to unmute yourselves, we've got a panel discussion next week. And we're incredibly excited because they have a survey out there to say, how might we, well, Lauren, you tell them. I'll hush now. Where are you? Unmute yourself, my friend.
Hi,
Lauren
good to
West.
see you all.
There you are.
Thank you, everybody. So we were asked to talk about worship from a participant standpoint instead of from a worship leader standpoint. And so we're really excited to just dive into that question more deeply of what does it look like to worship when we're all at home, and how has that changed our relationship to worship, our relationship to our communities, our relationship to God. And so in the chat, I'm putting a link there. So if you have 5 minutes to take this survey, we would love to hear how you're worshiping and how your relationship to worship has changed. And we intentionally left that a really open question. So however you define worship is great. So it can mean turning into a formal service, or it might look like taking a walk and being really intentional about maybe a relationship with God or relationship with the universe, or however you kind of see that in your own lives. And so we're going to be facilitating a conversation where we talk about things that we've learned about ourselves and ask questions of the folks who are there next week, and also share some of the survey data, which so far has been really interesting. We've already had more than 30 participants, and we just shared it a few hours ago. And so we're really just excited to learn from this, and looking forward to seeing too how this might change how we worship indefinitely, not just for a season as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Lauren. Lauren and I had a great chat this afternoon, and we know that even when we go back to church, it's forever changed, right? We may make different choices. We'll always be in this both and area, and folks can choose to go to church wherever they want to. They can choose how they go to church at home. So Lauren, we are so excited. We're welcoming Lauren and Wes. They are both pastors on staff at the MCC of Greater St. Louis, and also Reverend Marie Alfred Harkey from MCC of the Palm Beaches, which is a smaller church, right, Lauren? So you guys have a real diverse program for us, and I can't wait to hear, and I encourage any of you to go ahead, click that link and take that survey. And if there's anyone out there that you've heard them say, gosh, I am going to church on Sunday, or I'm doing this, but it doesn't feel quite churchy, you know? Come on, invite them to sanctuaryonline.live next Tuesday night, and they're welcome to come. So thanks, Lauren. We're very excited for you. And then Mr. Nick Patras, a good friend of Sanctuary, and those of us who live here. Dr. Nick Patras is the Director of Student Counseling Services at Texas A&M University Commerce, located up a little bit northeast of the Dallas, outside the Dallas Metroplex, right? And Nick, I'm going to tell you right now, we're so excited for your program as well. I know many friends of mine who have a family member who struggles with mental health issues. And, you know, a lot of us who don't struggle with mental health issues are struggling with the restrictions placed on us by COVID. I can only imagine, you know, people who have a family member or who are a person with mental health that has, is just dealing with this. And so, Nick, we thought you'd be a phenomenal person to talk to us and to offer some service around this really important topic. So you want to speak a little bit to where you're going on June 2nd? Thanks,
Sure,
Nick.
I'll be happy to. Glad to be with you all this evening. Yeah, I think we're going to title this Mental Health and Well-Being During COVID-19. Tried to make it rhyme. But if we're dealing with mental health challenges, they certainly can be aggravated during a time of uncertainty and the change that Lily so well spoke of last week. Or if someone doesn't deal with mental health, but because of our social distancing, because of more isolation than maybe we're accustomed to, we may be experiencing some things that we normally don't deal with. So we'll kind of just touch on all of those topics on June the 2nd. Be delighted to be with you all.
Well, we're excited for that, and thank you. Thanks again. We just, every Tuesday night, if you can think, and I know I've got some friends that I'm going to reach out, Nick, especially for your topic on June 2nd, because I know they have a member of their family, and this affects the whole family, right? Same thing with Lauren, you and Wes and Marie. I can't wait to invite. So you here, we have a big crowd tonight, our biggest so far, actually. And I want to encourage you, all you have to do is send someone a link. We've made it really simple. We've tried hard to just go sanctuaryonline.live, and it brings you right into our Zoom room, bypasses any IDs or any passwords required. So we love to see you here. Thank you so much for coming. And oh, I forgot to show a couple, hold on, pretty slides. Hold on really quickly. Hold on. There they are. Look at those three. Gorgeous. There's Lauren and Wes and Marie. And then look at Nick, you look like you're a radio host there, is at the counseling center. So wanted to make sure I offered those pictures of y'all up. I'm gonna stop sharing them. And for y'all out there tonight, thank you again. And you can stay in chat. I'll unmute everybody, or you can head off and do wonderful Tuesday night things. Thanks again. And thank you so much for your continued prayers for Ken, for Tom, and for the rest of us that are living on Sanctuary.
Joby?
Blessings.
Joby?
Happy Tuesday.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Joe-
That's okay. Someone talk. I'm good.
Joey, it's Marilyn. David
Hi,
and
Marilyn.
I wanted to send their love and good wishes to everybody.
And prayers.
And
for Kim.
they just couldn't do the Zoom tonight, but you may see
Oh,
them.
thank you. I'll make sure he
Bye,
knows.
everybody.
Absolutely.
Hi, Nikki.
No, yes, I can see you
Bye.
still.
Damn it.
Yes, we can see you, Cindy.
Thanks, Barb. Oh. Is there any
Good
way
to
to
see
stay in this
everybody.
chat?
Yeah, you can just stay here. I'm going to try and make you all, I'm going to try and turn off our recording.
I saved it.
The file?
Yeah.
Oh, the file, yes. There is a recording, and I'll be able to put that out into
Yeah, you know it all.
an email. Check my
Send
Facebook.
that to David Urban.
Excellent.
Thank you. We love you.
Thanks,
We
guys.
enjoyed
Love you.
it.
We think about
Love
you a
you
lot.
guys. So good to see you.
Thanks
You
for the
too.
pointers. Nice set of
Absolutely.
horns,
Tom, I'm
guys.
so
Bye,
glad
everyone.
Tom got on. And Mom, there you are,
Is
unmuted.
Tom still here?
Yeah.
Mary Beth and Jan.
I gotta
And
go
Tom.
put
Robin and Kathy back again.
Aw.
Thank you, Diane.
It's Joe Bell's mom. She looks
I'm
sweet.
unmuting everybody.
Look at
Hi,
Cindy.
Mom.
Hey, for all you Sanctuary in the Woods folks, Shelley.
Look at who?
Look at
you.
Cindy.
Hello. Love you
I miss
too.
you.
I miss you more.
Aw.
Thanks again, Barb, for managing, and Barb and Cheryl for managing the chat box. Appreciate that. I'm trying to unmute you guys, and I'm.
Of course she is.
Yeah,
Joe,
yeah. She's
I'm
on
still
mute.
seeing your screen, Joe.
Pardon?
Joe,
She
did you
wants us
stop the
on or
recording?
off?
On.
Oh.
Are you still sharing your screen?
I'm trying not to.
How's
Yeah,
that
you
I have
are.
a new computer.
Yeah, so I didn't catch Darcel before she jumped off, but Shelley.
I'm still here.
Oh, Darcel, you're there.
Hello.
Okay, so Shelley King was very concerned about y'all, very concerned about Ken. So she and I exchanged a couple of texts today, but I'll keep her posted. But I assured her I think Ken's going to be okay.
Thank you. Yeah, she texted me yesterday about it.
Yeah.
So,
Her son Clark and my son are BFFs.
really?
Whoa.
Yeah. He
Cool.
doesn't know how to fish worth a flip. So.
Yo.
Mandy taught Clark, Shelley's son Clark, how to fish.
Andy's
Oh,
got to
cool.
wake up.
Sorry to
I am
interrupt.
late.
So, can you get me off of here? Yo,
Oh, you trying to
I
get off
want
of
to
here?
get off of here.
Why?
Well,
I
because
love
my
your
show's on.
All right, Joan. I'm going to kick you all
Sorry,
off.
normally I would stay in chat.
We miss our
Love you,
cruise
cousin.
buddies, man.
So did Tom leave?
But I don't know how
Tom
to
left.
shut this off.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
Love you guys.
Carol, tell me how to get off of here.
I'm gonna,
Hit the little red button that says leave.
It's not. Oh, there it is. My bottle of water was in the way. Well, ta-ta, everyone.
Bye,
Have a
Joan.
nice evening.
Bye, Joan.
Bye.
Bye.
Over and out now.
I miss you.
over and out. Love you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Love you,
Nice to meet you,
cousin.
Emma.
Get out.
I'm clicking. I'm clicking.
It's a never ending. We're all saying bye, man. It's
Are you
like,
okay?
like
done?
being at my Mexican family's house.
Yeah,
Like
we're
15
saying bye.
Are we still on?
Yeah.
You know what, y'all?
Huh?
Yes.
See ya.
Say it.
I think we're in the,
I'm having
no, you hang up first.
No, you hang up.
Okay, no, you hang up. Okay.
I'm out of
You
here.
hang up first.
Love you all.
Crabtree, what are you doing?
Oh, I see Cindy big time.
Well, you know,
All right.
it can't miss me. The lake
Bye,
is
y'all.
big here. And then there's Joe Bell.
I'm trying to turn it off, but I have a new computer, so I really don't even know how at this point. So, I'm gonna say see ya.
Peace out.
Peace out.
Right. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Barb. Bye, Barb.
Bye.
Bye, Barb.
Joe Bell's like, get off of here. Will you just leave?
I know. I'm trying to do that myself, but I've lost control.